Hi, this is the Be Well with Michelle Greenwell podcast. Our heartwarming conversation is designed to lift you on your wellness journey. Grab your cup of tea and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell podcast. And today I'm excited to share a revolutionary leader in dental health. We have Dr. Mark Mortiboyes here. Hello, Mark. Welcome.
It's such a pleasure to be here from sunny South England, very near Wimbledon, where the tennis is taking place right now.
I love it. So let me share a little bit about Mark so you have an idea of where we're going to go and the expertise that he's bringing to this conversation today. So Mark entered his dentistry training back in the early 80s, and he began a mission to fuse integrative approaches with modern dentistry. And after he had a near-death experience in 1990, his desire to see more people find assistance with their health through dental care became more important. His own experience has been with joint issues, migraines, tropical illnesses, and more have pushed him to find the special dental and healthcare excellence that he has desired for his own work. Mark addresses the mind, body, and spirit trifecta, and through education and guidance, he empowers individuals to reclaim their control over their oral and general health. And with a career marked by innovation, Mark established the UK's first dental confidence centre. I love that.
Yeah.
Pioneering fear-free dentistry techniques long before that became even a conversation that was in mainstream. And his expertise has garnered him plentiful recognition, having graced radio shows, news channels. You said Channel 5, which I would be a UK channel. And even we have News at 5 is what we have here. So, and even advising esteemed organizations like the Chelsea Football Club. So
absolutely,
So Mark's background is diverse and so interesting. And we've got a lot of places that we're going to be able to head with this conversation. All right, Mark. So let's start with what tea did you bring to the conversation today?
Okay, so we were tuning in and we were having a bit of a discussion. And I was born in the 60s. I was born in 1964. And I remember my first childhood memories were going to a dentist with always a glass by the sort of spit bowl of the dental chair, and it would always be this pink color. And then when I was in medical school, we found out that it was called thymol. It's a thymol tablet, so like a pink tablet that just dissolved in the water. And back then, I didn't really appreciate that it was basically the essential oil of thyme. And because dentistry from its infancy was driven by alchemy and herbalism. So we all know about the oil of clove and the magic of how clove oil can help as an analgesic and as an antiseptic for dentistry and for our mouth. Well, thyme was equally that revered back in the day. And it's one of those products or herbs that's kind of getting forgotten about. I feel clove is getting forgotten about as dentistry moves on with more innovations and technologies. They're sort of throwing away some of the ancient alchemy and herbalism, etc. So I thought I'd bring thyme tea to the table, and it's that way around. So this is a box of thyme, which I don't really drink like all the time. It's not my go-to flavor, but I like it as a medicinal. And once in a while, I like it for a throat gargle. If I'm feeling a bit throaty, I tend to also go for clove type teas as well. But to mix it up, I like a thyme one as well. And I like to just kind of flush it around my gums once in a while, not as a daily tonic. I don't have gum disease, but as a maintenance program, I think thyme is a lovely, refreshing tea flavor to kind of enhance the freshness of our breath and to just keep the bacteria that might cause a little bit of smelly breath. And if our gums just bleed a little bit, and occasionally my gums will bleed, I'll floss them and go, oh, I'm a dentist, and my gums are kind of bleeding today. So I like to kind of do whatever else I can do to kind of magically, kind of quickly calm that down. Because I know I've learned the hard way watching so many patients over so many years that if you just sit on early symptoms and allow them to kind of progress, and bleeding gums is just the starting point to kind of really quite nasty gum disease. You can nip it in the bud quickly, simply. Yeah, that's the wise way to live, right? I feel we all know that. Some of us have had to learn the hard way about that one. So whilst I do use other products, and we'll go into those like coconut oils and so many other herbs and teas as well, I thought I'd focus on thyme today. So, and the lovely play with the English language, and that's the tincture of thyme. So we would think of thyme, Thyme, but equally the tincture of Time. So for healing, we all want a quick fix in this day and age. We want a cavity, we got a cavity, or we got some toothache. We want a one visit wonder with the dentist and hope it's all sorted out. But actually, most of the time, realistically, even after a great piece of dentistry, it might take a day to a week to a month to fully settle. You know, the neuralgia in the tooth post-operatively may take even months to really calm down. So the tincture of thyme can be very, very potent when we really realize that things do take time. But I'm going to focus on Thyme because of its healing properties, anti-inflammatory properties for oral health and gum health in particular. And it was used, and it's still used in some dental clinics, but we're kind of moving away, and it is still in a very well-known toothpaste called euthymal. Euthymal toothpaste, certainly in the UK, is still around. Maybe in the US, maybe not. I couldn't tell you. And certainly in Canada, Nova Scotia, I don't know. But it's not a mainstream ingredient in most mainstream toothpastes. And it is in euthymal, which is a mainstream toothpaste, and it is in some herbal toothpastes that are more what I'd call the organic health food shop toothpaste, more natural toothpaste that don't have any kind of gunk in them, no petrochemicals, and more natural based toothpaste, which are not mainstream, sadly. And that's one of my missions. Is I keep talking on podcasts. Maybe the big companies will maybe kind of get excited by my idea that the masses are starting to change their taste, and they are wanting to move down more a natural health toothpaste. So for them to maintain their market leadership, maybe they're going to have to change. So that's one of my missions, is to see if we can shift the mindset of the big companies that produce all our toothpaste, or the main producers of our toothpaste. So we'll see. So the tincture of thyme. So cheers. I'm going to have a sip now.
I love it. Awesome. All right. I'm going to cheer you.
Lovely to meet you. Cheers. And you got a picture of my little dachshund. We've got a little bit of a senior dachshund now. She's getting on in years, over 12 years of age. That's not actually her, but she's one of these mini dachshunds that's quite feisty, very fun if she loves you, and not so fun if she doesn't love you.
Love it.
And she loves showing her teeth.
I love it. All right, so I'm gonna bring two ideas from the Cape Breton Tea Company. So one is, as you're talking about thyme, when we put our teas with intentions together and we base them on the 5 elements from Chinese medicine using Western herbs instead of Eastern herbs, we created a blend called Thyme Passages. So, and I've consumed that as a tea, but I've also ground it up and then put it into cooking. And a lot of people will cook with thyme. So I'm just, as you were talking about all these wonderful ways to interact with thyme, I was thinking, oh, I do have these ways that I do interact with thyme, and it has such a beautiful fragrance. So being able to, I don't know, it's like a refreshing lift when you're smelling thyme.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my first thought off of what you had shared. But the second part that I'm going to share comes from the apple passion tea, because I went to the clove tea as we were talking about what teas would be supportive for mental health, dental health, for both of those pieces. So I've chosen apple passion tea, which is from the fire element. The Thyme Passages one is from the metal element, actually, which is lung and large intestine systems. So now I'm over here in fire element, so circulation, triple warmer, how all of our burners are working. So for the audience that's listening and wondering, what am I talking about? So let me get to some ingredients. So this one has redbush rooibos, apple, cinnamon, cloves, orange, rosehip hibiscus, vanilla pieces, and then natural and artificial flavors, depending on which is essential oils from the company that I pull from. So those are all blended in here. And I wanted to bring that forward, but also the intention, because the teas have an intention on the package. These teas with intention have extra ones on the back. So the one I pulled out is from the front. The heart of this blend is its focus on the passion for life, clear insight, and the center of wisdom. I'm sure you and I are going to be diving into more about that. But I wanted to share that piece because as we're bringing in these ingredients and we're thinking about how can they support us, but also what qualities do they bring to our life? That's what I really like to bring out about the herbs. So I'm going to have one more toast to you and thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Cheers.
And cheers. Blanche, as we would say in Cape Breton.
Oh, brilliant.
And one of the things I was thinking about the cloves and the cinnamon and the apple too is the comfort that those herbs bring us. And I know it's for a hot day to be able to have, or not a hot, it's a hot day outside today. It's a very hot day outside. I did make a hot tea, but that idea of when it is cold or when you're feeling like you need a little bit of comfort, then to be able to dive into the warmth that these herbs bring us. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of those ingredients and what that means for dental health?
Yeah, well, apart from the vanilla, maybe the rhubarb as well, but a good 50% of those ingredients remind me of Christmas time. So those kind of mulled wine kind of spices without the wine, without the alcohol, even though it apparently evaporates off when we boil it and cook it. I learned today that vanilla is actually very, very anti-inflammatory. And when I read through some of the ingredients I didn't know so much about, I didn't know really what the healing capacity, potentiality of rhubarb tea is until I read it today. And what I knew as a very sacred tea from South Africa and the bush folk that, the Aboriginals of South Africa, shall we call them, the natives of South Africa, it's their kind of holy tea. So I knew it'd have some magical potency. But yeah, again, a very, very potent phytochemical for antioxidants, healing, anti-inflammatory. And put these all together is a real alchemy of magic, shall we just say. And then whilst I'll talk a bit more about cloves shortly, because that's one of my big passions, is because it is one of the pioneers of dentistry, and most people, certainly our generation, even a lot younger, will remember the smell of going into a dental clinic and smelling the oil of clove, which is called eugenol, or the oil is the Latin name is eugenol. But I've also picked up that you mentioned pectin. And pectin was very important in my brain when Chernobyl was kicking off, or Chernobyl. I remember reading about all these amazing people that almost pretty much sacrificed their lives to go into the cities and into the kind of chambers where all this radiation was blooming out. And what stuck in my mind was the power of pectin. And they just shipped in from all around the world. Pectin is just so absorbent of radiation. So it's a really potent product, like a bit like charcoal is for chimneys of carbon dioxide and other gases and heavy metals. Charcoal is this very absorbent product of toxic products to mankind and human and the animal kingdom and the planet. Pectin seems to have this ability with radiation. And I have a lot of patients over many years that are nervous, have been nervous about dental radiation. And thankfully, it's become digitized over the last since the new millennium. Most dental clinics will have digital X-ray radiation. Let's just call it radiation for the moment. It's just quite scary on one level, but when you kind of go down the rabbit hole of what really is going on here, it's very low for dentistry. It's not so low for chest X-rays and some of these bigger kind of scans of the brain, what are now called cone beam CT scans. Whilst they are shrinking the dose every year with better technology, they're still much, much higher than dentistry. And we often explain, whilst you may be phobic of it and afraid of it, it is the lowest dose for any medical procedure, but it is still radiation. And there are things you can do to counteract that if you want to. and one of them is homeopathics, taking the homeopathic compound before and after. And so we holistic biological dentists generally have them in the clinics, but a lot of my patient base are already on that wavelength. So they come in, they say, I've taken my rad brom, which is radium bromide, or my X-ray 30C, which is the kind of code for the tablet. So they're very proud that they've taken it, and they say, look, I consent to an X-ray, et cetera, et cetera. And why not consider even taking pectin? If you're having to have a lot of X-rays, maybe not dental, but just chest and other parts of the body, but even if you have to have a series of dental ones, say you have to have some really complicated procedures done, and you have to have multiple small films, maybe a full screening of the mouth, some periodontists will take 10 to 20 of these. So that's when it starts to add up in terms of radiation dose. You know, a quick screen of this side and a quick screen of that side for a routine check every 1 to 3 years, I would still say is a low dose, because the way the radiological boards like to teach us is to explain to our patients that one dental small mouth X-ray is equivalent to 1 hour of flying and the background radiation dose that we get when we go flying. So most of us are quite comfortable to fly to Tenerife and maybe be in a plane for 10, 15 hours or so, 10 to 12 hours. And that's like 10 X-rays. And let's be brutally honest, none of us are really dropping dead from dental X-ray. At the same time, we have illnesses that are on the massive increase. And the C word is huge, and a lot of people are associating maybe even dental X-ray to thyroid C, whatever word you want to call it, tumors, etc. And we also found out not that long ago that the big lead aprons that we used to put around the body, on the chest and around the thyroid, were actually maybe potentially making the situation worse, because we thought it would be a barrier to stop the X-ray from going through into our organs or into our body parts, and it would just deflect back. But what's been since found out is that somehow radiation gets in and underneath and then doesn't come out because it keeps bouncing back and forth. So a very, very clever scientist has proven that we're actually safer to not have a lead apron or even a collar on our thyroid. People still will have them for psychological benefit. Some people just say, no, I need to have that. I can't have this X-ray unless I do have this. So it's a really contentious subject at the moment. Are lead aprons good for us or bad for us? And most of us have kind of are going with the science now that's saying we're better off just having the one zap, let it fizz through our bodies and do its thing. It's called ionizing radiation, and ionizing means it's a bit like an oxidizer. It will irritate our cells. Like, that's what radiation does. That's why there's such a big worry about excessive radiation. Certainly if you live near an atomic energy plant, or if there's an explosion like in Chernobyl, or if there was an atomic bomb going off like in Nagasaki, etc., etc. We do know, it's pretty obvious that excessive doses are very, very toxic to us and destructive to our cells and our DNA, etc. So that's enough. But I just got onto that subject. Didn't know I was going to talk about the pectin today, because it's not really dentistry, but kind of the link with X-ray is quite strong. And I'd like to reassure your audience that dental X-rays need to be consented for, and the dentist needs to justify that X-ray. And our governing bodies now make sure that to keep our indemnities, we need to prove that we are justifying that X-ray. Because back in the day, it was just every 6 months, you just had a zap. It was there wasn't really a justification other than you're in my chair and I'm just wanting to be 100% sure that you're decay-free or gum disease-free or disease-free. Now it's like, well, we can do a lot of that visually, and with our instruments, our probes that dentists prod onto our gums and between our teeth, and with magnification now and good lighting, a lot of it can be diagnosed relatively easily as long as we've got a baseline X-ray. So if you're an existing patient and you were seen a year ago and everything was fine on the X-ray a year ago, and then you look a year later and everything looks the same, you can justify saying, we'll take an X-ray in another year or 2 years' time. We don't like going past 3 years. So our mantra is, if you're low risk, we take an X-ray every 3 years. If you're high risk, it's every 6 months to every year, depending on that kind of highness of risk. And the majority of people who've got a few fillings and have lost a tooth, they're in that mid-range, which is every 2 years we take an X-ray. So that's kind of our baseline for justification But ultimately, it's symptom driven, it's image driven. If we see problems or if patients see problems and alert us, they're going to consent because they know there's something wrong. But certainly symptom driven. If there's a toothache or let's just say a symptom, that's easier to say rather than a toothache. So that's all about pectin. We've talked about pectin. I wanted to touch on cloves because it's a big thing, because I'm seeing it kind of disappear from dentistry because the oil has been substituted for other products over the last 20, 30 years since we've been moving away from metals in the mouth, especially the controversial metals, these very clever metals back in the day, say 150, 200 years ago, where we could mix a bunch of metals together, be an alchemist, and without having to heat things up and melt things like steel and gold and things like that, we could actually just mix it up at room temperature. And then over 6 to 8 hours, this alloy would actually fuse and set in our teeth without causing a big heat reaction, what we call an exothermic reaction. So in its day, it was amazing. So the proletariat started getting their teeth treated, because back in those days, if you were poor or seen as the peasant of the land, at best you would have had a tooth pulled, and it would have probably been pulled by a farmer or a farrier anyway. But if you did get to a dentist, they would have pulled it for you. It's usually the barbershop, the red and white pole barbershop, Sweeney Todd kind of places. And then some very clever alchemists devised the mercury mix, because we all know that mercury at room temperature is this liquid, silvery bubble of amazing liquid. We've seen them in thermometers. We've seen them in little games that we played with as children. They've all been banned now. You just don't see them anymore. They've all been confiscated by people in hazmat suits and things. So you kind of get the sense that it's been treated very seriously as a toxic compound, yet it's in most people's teeth. And without going too far and without scaremongering, because I don't want to scaremonger, but I would also get you to think about what's in your teeth and come away from today's podcast going, okay, I'd like to know what's in my teeth. Maybe get them tested, because there are some simple electrogalvanic tests we can do on the metals in our mouth. And that's kind of maybe one thing we can start with. And it's all about checking how rusty they are. And whilst there aren't meters that officially tell us that, we can electrically assess if they give off a voltage or a millivoltage. And the higher the millivoltage, the indication is, therefore the correlation is it must be more oxidizing and more rusting. So when we've put up a fence in our garden, for example, and we hammer in some nails, the first year they're shiny. Maybe the second year they're a little less shiny, and over 10, 20, 30 years, they just get more rusty, a bit red coated and oxidized layer coated. So that's kind of happening to our teeth, but also to our fillings. And when we're chewing on them, we're maybe rubbing that rust away. And whilst I kind of sit in the middle with the mercury debate, because I know there's many people who have mercury fillings and have great health, and there are many people who have a mercury filling and they deteriorate quickly and they recover when they have it replaced. So it's a bit like cigarettes. Some people can smoke 100 cigarettes a day. Some people can drink 10 Budweisers every night, and they live a good, strong life. They never get ill. They live to 100. They're the lucky ones, right? Then there's the other end of the spectrum. There's people who are super sensitive, and they just can't have a lot of toxic stuff going on in their life. And that sort of brings on to the question, then maybe we should be looking at the constitution before we touch the dentistry. And maybe we should deal with the dentistry as well, but maybe when the person is constitutionally stronger. And that brings in the rabbit hole of detoxification and allergy studies, and looking at why is this individual and why is society getting more and more allergic. When we were children, there weren't nut allergies and chemical allergies like we've got today. So things are changing in modern man, for sure, for the worse. And dentistry is just one of those potential irritants, or what doctors will call environmental toxins. So I think mercury fillings are a potential environmental toxin for sure. They could also make you worse when they're drilled out, if they're just drilled out without any protection. That's no different to asbestos removal of buildings, farms that have got asbestos roofs. In this day and age, they get quarantined, don't they? If the building firms find out there's asbestos when they do a survey, they will create these kind of air pressure domes around, like a tent with air pressure management, so that the asbestos is controlled, doesn't sort of plume out into the atmosphere. And also the operators will be wearing special respirators and things. So there is a technique called smart amalgam removal that's been kind of promoted and educated by an organization called the IAOMT, which is the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. It's a group of dentists that are training dentists to treat this product like asbestos, treat it like an environmental toxin, and if it's overkill, so what? We're not going to take any chances with it, because there are always, with any new idea, there's going to be the haters and the ridiculers who say you're just kind of fear mongering and you're overreacting because we've had amalgam for 150, 200 years. So you can see why people are attached to the product, because it's worked. It's a great product in many ways mechanically. It's a cheap product as well. But at the same time, there's no desire for it anymore, because people don't want grey silver teeth. They want white teeth. They want aesthetic dentistry, cosmetic dentistry. So thankfully, the cosmetic movement, on one level that's quite shallow, has actually shifted the movement towards what I'd call more crystalline dentistry or more natural dentistry. So we've gone through the kind of like porcelain stage. We're now in zirconia stage, which is man-made diamond. So as a crystal head myself, it's music to my ears that we're now milling out of a sugar cube sized piece of zirconia, which is man-made diamond. We're milling fillings through CAD/CAM systems, through lots of clever technology, creating fillings and crowns and dentistry generally from crystal. There's a lovely shift from going from metal to crystal over the last 200 years. It's not perfect for everyone. The very long-jawed, heavy-jowled folk still have to have something like gold, which is then having hardeners added to it, because gold on its own is too soft. So it has to have an alloy of other metals that are added to it, which are contentious. So it gets expensive, because the better metals are like platinum. So you add an alloy of platinum and gold on a piece that's the size of a tooth, that gets expensive just to buy in the product, let alone the dentistry and the time in the dental office. So that's the kind of thing that I was wanting to start on, because of clove being the kind of the precursor to dentistry. And whilst it's being phased out, I still feel that we're missing a link with not using clove as a tonic for ourselves. And I'm not suggesting clove oil. I'm not a fan of putting essential oils in the mouth. And we'll hopefully get time to talk about the oral biome or the microbiome, because we're living in an age now with so many microscopes and scientists showing studies and what's the right way of putting it? Evidence to support the positive and negative reactions of different products in our body, from our gut to our mouth. And with bleeding gums still not going away, there's more and more research going down the rabbit hole of the biome of the mouth. And maybe the disease of the mouth is nothing to do with whether you're having fluoride or whether you're having sugar or whether you're having this or that or everything else. Maybe just the whole balance of the ecosystem of the mouth is so out that it's lost its protective sense, or it's overreacting. So you've got a lot of protectors, a lot of histamine and a lot of protectors, but these protectors are bullies. A bit like when we had lockdown 4 years ago, these bullies were kind of irritating us. So on one level, they're protective, trying to save our life. And on another level, they're kind of holding us back and potentially destroying our life. You get locked in for too long and you're living under a mask all your life. It's not good for our health long term, maybe in the short term, but not in the long term. And that's kind of what's been proven now with the the inflammatory reactions. The histamine release is great at first, but if it hangs around, it starts to become destructive. And it's not just in the mouth, but we're just going to stick to gum disease today, where, it just keeps going and then it starts nibbling away at our jawbone, and then our teeth get longer as everything shrinks down with aggressive gum diseases. And then you get parasites getting in, and then it just spawns this evil, evil journey where generally pretty healthy people can get really sick very, very quickly. And we saw it in World War I in particular. It was called trench mouth. It's when you can imagine these young recruits being kind of like these 18, 19-year-olds being pushed in, ordered into the trenches in France. And they were so young, not really military trained, just kind of recruited in, just thrown at the front line. They were sitting in mud with a rifle in mud and gases, all these nasty gases coming at them, with the fear of at any time now, guns and opposition are going to come to kind of take your life. And I think the only thing that kept them going was smoking. So they would stay warm or comforted by having a cigarette. They had to be careful because you couldn't have the light of the cigarette above the trench line, because that would actually signal where you are, and then a sniper would finish your life. So they all had to smoke with sort of facing down into the mud. But ultimately, fear, anxiety, smoking, cold, malnutrition just created this awful oral disease called trench mouth. And we have seen trench mouth out in the normal kind of environment, not in battle time or wartime, but in socially deprived areas where people are undernourished, malnourished, smoking heavily, maybe living in cold conditions. Certainly street people who are just not lucky enough to be under a roof, so they're living either in sleeping bags on the streets. And then when those people get examined, they basically have trench mouth. And then you have milder versions of that, even in good socioeconomic groups, where it's okay. It used to be seen as very okay to be smoking 60 cigarettes a day and drinking lots of wine and being a high type A personality in business and all these business meetings. Certainly in the 80s, it was all about go, go, go. So we were seeing a lot of gum disease back in those days just by high flyers overcooking themselves. Just like keeping that energy going. They were maybe taking stimulants as well, the what I'd call the white powders of the world. And not a lot of people really think maybe that's what's causing it. Yeah. And it's all about, you got to brush your teeth more. When I say to me, the education is all about oral hygiene. You got to brush your teeth, make sure the plaque is off your teeth. And on many levels, that's correct. But who's looking after the rest? Who's looking after the stress? Who's looking after all the habits that are destructive? And that's, to me, is where certainly a dental practice or a medical team that wants to look after the emotional aspect of healthcare. So not necessarily the psychiatry, but it could be, because why are some people on a very self-destructive path? Workaholism is now seen as a mental health problem. Is seen as a disorder, like any ism, like alcoholism or even smokingism, whatever the term is for over smoking. These are all kind of addictions, aren't they? And I think addictions are the scourge of modern man, and where man has got so out of balance. And who's looking after these people? People tend to end up either dead in the mortuary. If they're lucky, they get a heart attack and then they recuperate and they have a near-death experience that kind of wakes them up and they decide to change their life 100%. They go the other way. They leave that type A job and maybe just find their more heartfelt path, shall we call it? Their true, what I call a dharma, where they've had an epiphany from their ill health and their crisis, where in religious terms it's like you're on your knees and you pray to God and you say, I surrender, give it up, give it up to God. And then you get these intuitions, these guidances to run a different way of living, where it's much more in tune with one's intuition and one's kind of spirit connection or God connection, rather than the ego and driving towards, I've got to make more money, I've got to get this promotion, I've got to get this gold medal, or whatever the driver is. That is fine if it's not killing you, but if it's killing you, you've got to start to question all this stuff. So as a dentist, I've just seen highly driven people who have just ground their teeth away. They have heavy smoking habits, let alone drug habits, that are just destroying the oral microbiome, and we just see this mouth out of balance. And we are potentially just saying, you need to brush your teeth a bit better, get this plaque off. And whilst plaque is a destroyer, and plaque maybe is meant to be in our mouths, but if we are not living homeostatically or in balance, then this plaque becomes like a silent killer to our mouth. And we're now finding out that it's not just a silent killer to our mouth, it's the rest of our body, because we're finding out that the microbes in our mouth are now leaking through our gums, through gum disease, and are ending up the rest of all the body parts. Anywhere where blood supply goes, these microorganisms can go. And science is catching up. We're proving it's causing dementia and Alzheimer's. We're proving it's causing cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, you name it. It's these bacteria or these microorganisms are showing up in these different organs, in diseased organs. So we're in a mess unless we, one, brush our teeth better for sure, but also look at the real root cause of gum disease. What's really slowing us down to the point where we can't protect ourselves anymore? And that's ultimately when the biome is in balance, we're in self-protection. We have this ring of confidence around us, this immunity that comes from the whole network of our body systems working in harmony with each other, from our nervous system to our endocrine system or hormonal system to our enzyme system, where everything's in balance. And we all know that. We go on holiday and we relax, we go on the beach. We might get a little bit sick when we get back from holiday with a healing crisis, but we have a period where we go, oh, life's so much better. I'm now breathing better. I'm feeling better. And if you're eating better as well and drinking better when you're on holiday, then you come home either lucky to maintain that sense. And if you're a little unlucky, you might get a healing crisis because the body's had an opportunity to kind of release some toxins. And you may just get a little bit of a sniffle afterwards or a bit of a headache afterwards. But when you're in the know, you know that's a good thing. And in the dental know, seeing the mouth becoming a bit more metallic or tasting metals in the mouth, and maybe even just get the gums getting swollen for a short time after a detox, it's kind of like, you know, you're going to come right. So to me, holistic dentistry and certainly shamanic dentistry is looking at diseases from a very different perspective. And ask yourselves, what's this really teaching us? What's really going on? Is it all about just you need to brush your teeth with fluoride or without fluoride or with a toothbrush or electric toothbrush or with a water flosser? So there's all these great technologies coming out to improve our oral hygiene. And for many people, by default, thankfully, they do get better just by doing that. But there is a very large group of people, I would say at least 20% of people who just don't really get that much better. The things improve on the surface, but all the diseases are still rummaging deeper down. And that's because the cure or the root cause hasn't really been dealt with. And if people are lucky, they make changes just by the diagnosis. So if you get a scary diagnosis, like you're going to lose some, if you don't change your ways, you're going to lose your teeth in 5 years. For a lot of people, that's a nice big wake-up call to say, you know what, I'm going to stop the cigarettes. I'm going to get a patch. And that's happened over the last 10, 20 years. I've seen a lot of nicotine kind of shifts with modern man. We're seeing a lot less smoking in public. And I'm sure that's had a huge impact, positive impact on oral health, let alone general health. So I think if you get shocked into it, that's great. But what if you don't? And if that isn't the only troublemaker, what if there's something else deeper in causing this? So it could be just going very spiritually now. So you can work on the emotional aspect, on fear and anxiety, through all the things that I've learned over the years. I sort of went through in my teenagers through a lot of hypnotherapy to help my sort of school exam nerves. I was just like, I was a bright kid, but I was underperforming at school in the exams because I just struggled with writing it down. And my father's girlfriend at the time was a hypnotherapist. So I was very blessed in my late teens and early 20s to experience hypnotherapy for my own personal benefit. And that was an amazing, amazing thing. But it also helped me realize that anxiety can be a big thing for other people. So it opened my eyes to be an empath, in essence. And I don't know whether you can be that empathic unless you've walked in other people's shoes. So I felt like I was very young to get that experience. So I was very grateful for that. And as I'm now 60, I feel like I've walked in a lot of different shoes and I've experienced many different healing journeys and healing paths for myself and helped other people through their journeys. I feel I can now speak with conviction, not to say what works and what doesn't work, because I definitely know that one man's food is not everyone. One man's food it can be someone's poison as well. So whatever I talk about today may not resonate with everybody, but there will be something that will resonate. And you have to have the courage, I feel, to trial out numerous good ideas to see if they actually work for you. And so we talked about clove. So it's bringing us back to clove. And I'm a big fan of sucking and chewing a clove when I wake up in the morning and before I go to bed. So it's kind of like my sugar-free sweet, shall we say, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And what I do is I suck it for about 5 minutes like it's a peppermint. And then when it's a bit more jellified and hydrated, then I nibble it, but I keep the saliva in my mouth. And this is what I teach my patients is to keep the clove in your mouth and your saliva. Never swallow the saliva. So you end up with a big mouthful of the fluid, and then you nibble it and then release the oil. And then when the oil's in your saliva, it doesn't burn the skin, because essential oils, when they're neat, can burn. And we don't really want to achieve that. We don't want to create trauma in our kind of either our maintenance program or our healing program. And so this guidance is for me is for just my oral health maintenance, but it could be also for someone who's got gum disease, because the oil of clove mixed in the saliva will then become an antiseptic, and then you just swish it around, not like a gargle for the throat unless you have a sore throat, but you sort of pump it between the teeth like a water jetting device, like a jacuzzi, and you're getting all that eugenol swishing around and kind of refreshing, flushing out the bacterial and microbial colonies, because even fungus and even up to a point, parasites like amoeba can be controlled by oil of clove or essential oil of clove or eugenol. So, and that's been researched. It's not like, oh, Mark's just talking gobbledygook. There are research papers out there. I think I sent you a couple online this morning. So I feel like I can talk with conviction about some of the ideas. Some people poo-poo like coconut oil. There's not that much research on coconut oil, but it's a tradition that's been done for 3,000 plus years in India with Ayurvedic medicine. And it's kind of coming out now that there is research proving that coconut oil has these magical benefits, that somehow magically kills off the anaerobes and the critters that cause us distress, but somehow magically keep the commensals or the what some people call the good bacteria or the good bugs still there, so it doesn't kind of nuke everything. So going back to my clove story for all your audience, is that when you've then got a mouthful and you've done it for 2 or 3 minutes and you've broken up that piece of clove into tiny fragments, then swallow it in one big gulp straight into your gut. So then you've then got cloves first thing in the morning on an empty stomach and last thing at night in your gut whilst you go to sleep. And there are YouTubes galore on the benefits of clove for gut health and parasite cleansing and even glucose regulation. So anyone that's pre-diabetic or diabetic, just by having cloves, there's research showing that you can transform your blood glucose levels just with cloves. I mean, this little bit of twig, bud, that can do all this magic. And I'm so passionate about that. I just know that if everyone did that, I just have this gut instinct that a lot of dental health will just massively improve without trying anything else. Obviously, brushing, flossing, and all these things are all going to be helpful, because plaque, full of these anaerobes or microbes that we would call bad bugs, if they're in the plaque and they're harder to control deeper in underneath the pockets, then other treatments are required. And that's where I really want to get across today that I'm not talking about giving guidance so that you just go on YouTube or Spotify and self-heal yourself. What I'm really talking about is finding yourself a dental team that resonate with what we're talking about today. And hopefully they're in your local neighborhood. If you're blessed, super blessed, they'll be in your town or village or city nearby. But if not, and if you feel the urge to go and travel to another clinic much further away to find that team, then so be it, because that's what I'd recommend. Because what I'm really saying is, if you don't have a team of people that resonate with you, then why are you going there? You know, is it just because it's convenient, just because your parents went there, just because your friends go there, etc., etc.? We don't do that with restaurants. If a friend recommends a restaurant, you go there and you don't like it, you don't go back. But you might to your dentist because you don't think about changing your dentist. I hope you don't have to change your dentist. I'm not telling you to change your dentist, but you might have to if you want the kind of guidance I'm suggesting. And what I'm alluding to is, when I say resonance, is will they take you seriously when you say something different to the mainstream? And the mainstream mantras in dentistry are getting quite repetitive. And whilst there's a lot of merit in them, there can be a lot of arrogance with all medical mantras, let alone dental mantras. And if you question authority, you're seen as an outlier, you're seen as a conspiracy theorist, and you're seen as a bit of a a misfit, and maybe there's an energy that they don't really want to entertain you. You just you're an irritant. So if you're getting that vibe from the clinic, then really, why are you going there would be my message. And hopefully you can shift them just by saying, well, actually, maybe watch this podcast or read this book. There's so much information out there that could shift dentists. And that's what I'm attempting to do with my podcast. I've had for 35 years, plenty of arrows thrown at me, and I'm still here. And I'm not really trying to get arrows in my back. I'm just wanting to help the profession evolve, and also for the profession to shift to help the people that don't want the mainstream mantra. It's not about changing the mainstream mantras, but it's more about anyone that thinks differently and outliers from that system, who's looking after them. And we now live in an age, with the internet, I'm realizing there are many more practices and clinicians that are stepping up and getting braver to announce that's how they work. For 30 years, I kept under the radar. I just didn't feel like it was something I should be going, hello, this is what I do, kind of thing. And I've seen a lot of doctors get into really, really difficult situations when they announced alternative ways of treating. And they've been treated very harshly, the doctors, and a number of dentists have been too. So therefore, going back to what I'm saying, who's helping the people that are wanting another way? And if you start researching, you will find someone. They're all out there now. We're all getting braver. We're living in this amazing age, what I'm calling the rebirth of Mother Earth. The planet is changing. The planet is telling us we need to change our ways, the way we're polluting it and running in it. And I feel like our bodies are telling us the same thing. So this crisis of healthcare is making us change. And the wise folk, hopefully your audience, are already on that path and have been on that path for a while and are now looking for another aspect. And a lot of people miss out the dental aspect. A lot of people start with nutrition, or they start with yoga, and they start with thinking they need to do calm down and slow down and meditate. And all these things have magic, but they're all stepping stones, and we're all on a journey. But a lot of people forget the dental journey, especially if they're comfortable. A lot of people are forced into a dental journey through toothaches, losing teeth, the embarrassing smile, and maybe bad luck. They could have fallen over, had a sports accident and smashed some teeth, then had to have bridges or root canals or implants, and they've abreacted and maybe haven't kind of been accepted by the body. And going through all those healing crises, there's an awakening to how dentistry can affect us. So how we can affect dentistry and how dentistry can affect us. And that's really my mission, is helping people to kind of go deeper down the rabbit hole of all the aspects of dentistry. And it won't resonate with everyone, because if you've got perfect teeth and you just brush your teeth with mainstream toothpaste and you've never had a cavity, my first bit of advice will be stick with what's working for you. Don't reinvent the wheel. But if you're doing all the things and you keep getting told by your dentist or your dental hygienist, you're doing the best you can, but I don't think we're going to save your teeth. They're just, every time you come, they're a bit worse. The gums have shrunk a little bit more. And that's happened for a long time. The dentists just scratch their head and say, well, we're just controlling it, we're slowing it down, but we are not stopping it. Mm-hmm. And I just personally know in my heart of hearts that that's because the true root cause isn't being dealt with. And it may be a very deep one. It may not just be all about the bugs. It may be so many other factors. And it takes a real detective to look at all the potential factors and look at someone from such a whole perspective to diagnose all the pieces of the puzzle. And it may take 5 or 10 years to really get it right? Like medicine as well. So there's no quick fix. That's the first message. There really isn't a quick fix on a dental healing journey. If you're someone in my generation who's got a number of fillings, a number of root canals, a number of crowns, a number of implants, it becomes quite a challenge to sift the wheat from the chaff, shall we call it. So it definitely takes a very detective-minded dentist. Certainly a dentist I've found over the years that's not as busy as they used to be, because dentistry is such a high-energy career. And whilst everyone says they're so scared of the dentist, maybe they don't realize that dentists have to absorb all that stress. So on an energetic level, dentists do get stressed themselves. And we hear about alcoholism in dentistry, we hear about the death rates in dentistry. The statistics are not great for dentists, or they haven't been. So a lot of dentists are tackling that now by cutting back their hours and treating patients with more time. So it's costing more to do dentistry for the patient's benefit, but also for the dentist's benefit. So we're living in an age where even the professionals are starting to wake up, which is wonderful. And that's when it will really happen quickly. But I kind of woke up through my own personal experiences. But I was lucky after that wake up that patients came to me with that higher knowledge and wisdom, and they were my teachers. And you as a patient can be the teacher to your dentist if they're open to listen. And the arrogant ones won't. And that's why I'm kind of alluding that you might need to change, to find an open-minded one, an open-hearted one. And if not the dentist per se, the team. So you can have discussions with the nurses, with the hygienists, because I find that the hygienists are much more on my page than the dentists generally. And the hygienists want to be more holistic, and they are very holistic anyway, because that's really what hygienist therapy really is. It's about prevention and cleaning and massage and all the good things for oral health. So if you can find that team to support the dentist, then you may shift the dentist at the same time, which is wonderful. So going back to my personal journey, and I've talked about how, some people wake up because they have some teeth taken out or they have a heart attack. I was kind of lucky in that I just died, right? And it was in my write-up that I apparently died twice. I didn't know I died. I had that kind of classic near-death experience when I was 26, got typhoid in Indonesia, and got kind of ill in Malaysia. And so I came round and I was told that they had to resuscitate me, and it was only antibiotics and saline that kind of got me back onto sort of some kind of even keel. And then that experience just opened me up. And I'm hearing from a lot of people who have car crashes and maybe drowning experiences where they survive. They come around and they see life in a very different way, a much more fearless way. And there's a great movie called Fearless with Jeff Bridges in it, which is he survives a plane crash. It's a great movie. And I just feel like I was that sort of person where I felt like there's nothing to fear ever again, which is kind of remarkable. And I think when you can access that, then you have got some kind of tapping into other forces. And I think it's ultimately fear is what blocks us. So I started really helping people who are fearful of dentistry, because sadly, supposedly over half the population won't go to the dentist because they're fearful. So half the population are already up the junction because they're not going to see the hygienist. They're not getting their preventative treatments. They may be watching YouTube and trying to treat themselves from home, which I hope they're not. But it might help, but it probably won't, and it will probably make them worse because I'm not convinced YouTube is the best source of medical guidance. It's an eye opener at best, and hopefully a signpost to go and find someone to kind of be your coach and be your guide. And that's kind of what I'm doing now online. Is kind of like, if you show me your X-rays, then I can be your coach. If I can direct you to the right dental team, I can be your coach, etc., etc. But that sort of once you're fearless of dentistry, you will then go regularly and you'll do the prevention, you'll do the maintenance, and also you'll face your demons, because there's a lot of people out there. I believe many people in your audience who are listening go, "Oh my God, I know I've got to do this. I've got to get this tooth out, or I've got to deal with this toothache. I've been sitting on it for a year, 2 years, dreading." Two things everyone seems to dread is the cost of it and the so-called pain of it, because there's this assumption that dentistry causes pain. But we live in an age where, with modern analgesics now, we've got so much available to us to make dentistry a joy. And for my patients in particular, because I can only speak about my patients, the people I've held their hand and held them through their fears, and they almost have their own near-death experiences going through dentistry. And I really truly believe it is like that for a lot of people, because you have to be awake. You can't be sedated. Well, you can, but a lot of people deal with it eyes open just with the local anesthetic. So you're kind of going through your near-death experiences to get your dentistry sorted. You come out the other end, maybe losing some teeth, maybe going through a little bit of some embarrassment of having to cover up the smile and feeling vulnerable, but eventually getting through it with good dentistry. So dentistry that can be put back, if it's a denture or a bridge or implants, whatever the dentistry is, you're coming through with a beautiful end result. It's not just beautiful, but functional. So you chew better, you digest better, you look better, you feel better. And it's amazing how when you look better, your inner smile comes out. But when you
Mm-hmm.
feel better, your inner smile comes out. So I kind of always make sure that I can help people to get their inner smile ideally first. So you're not treating the outer smile to get the inner smile. So by making people feel better, so most dental patients feel better as soon as they find a dental practice and a dentist and a hygienist and a team that believe in them, believe that they can turn things around. And when everyone's got hope and faith, the inner smile comes out because there's a belief, there's this magical, energetic, which is faith, right? We all know about faith healing. So again, not all dental practices will be that way inclined. So again, look and find and source the energetic dental practice. They'll be very popular. They won't necessarily be expensive. Everyone thinks, oh, they're going to be too expensive. Not necessarily. Because I sometimes think the more expensive practices are just the cosmetic practices, the highly driven practices who just want to put implants in your mouth and they want to veneer your teeth, etc., etc. So some of them, they're more wholesome, holistic practices, but they're going to cost money for sure, but they're not necessarily going to be the most expensive. That's what I've experienced. That's what I've been. I've always tried to be competitive in pricing because it's not just about the money. And you'll find that holistic dentists will be much more driven by healing and helping than by making money. And if you have an abundant mindset, you'll just know that your money will be looked after just by helping and healing. So the true healer mindset or heart set is all about helping, and you'll be served and you'll be looked after. If you stay connected to your source, for want of a better word, great spirit, I like to call it. As a shamanic dentist, I have a huge vibe for the great spirit. But I was brought up Christian. I still have Christian bones, and I love Jesus. I love God. But I've traveled a lot around the world, and I love all the faiths that I've experienced. I've loved Buddhism. You go into temples in Asia, and Hindu temples and Buddhist temples. I've even been to mosques. I haven't been to a synagogue in my puff. And I've been to kind of shamanic holy grounds like Ayers Rock in Australia. So all these beautiful places, I embrace them all. That's who I am. I'm a unity person. And when I have a patient that's coming into my room, that's the first and foremost thing is we unify. And I don't feel you can really help someone until you really unify. And that's what I call resonate. So when the two of you resonate, and occasionally I do get someone I don't resonate with, and that's what I know. I have to send them to someone else because I will not work with someone I'm not gelling with. I'll give them guidance and I will guide them usually to someone who will resonate with them. They just tend to be a different frequency, a different personality. I'm sure a lot of your audience will say, I like what Mark's saying, but I wouldn't want him as my dentist. But there'll be others who say, I wish he was in Nova Scotia, wish he could be my dentist, right? So it's all about being your true self. And when you're your true self, we call it Marmite. I don't think do you have Marmite in Canada?
No.
It's this kind of yeasty black stuff. It's called Vegemite in Australia, and it's kind of like a food stuff that's kind of comes from brewing. It's the black sludge from the brewery, and it's full of vitamin B, and it's kind of very yeasty, and you smear it on your toast, and it's used as a stock as well. So we say it's like Marmite because half the population love Marmite and half the population absolutely wouldn't touch it. So it's kind of one of those. So it's probably a bit like me, and probably a bit like many different beings that are kind of out there on the internet. You either click, but even if you don't click, you'll pick up some nuggets of information, and then you'll find your provider. And that's really what I'm about. And I'm not about trying to help everyone because I know that's not going to happen. I might be able to stimulate the next steps for everyone. I could be this catalyst. Hopefully I'm lighting some kind of touch paper that will come across probably more from my website than this podcast, because there are many videos on the website, and there's lots of blogs that I'm putting this all into more articulate kind of information. But I want to bring in, before we finish, why shamanic? Okay, because there are many dentists talking kind of what I'm talking about as a biological dentist, as a functional dentist, as a holistic dentist. But I've got this big calling to bring in shamanic healing and shamanic medicine. And I do feel like we're in this age, this birthing of a new age, or this new earth that's being birthed. It's kind of like the Enigma song, Returning to Innocence. I feel like, and Marianne Williamson wrote a book 30 odd years ago called Return to Love. So we're kind of returning to innocence, we're returning to love, And to me, it's also returning to the indigenous ways. I know you have a Celtic ancestry. I have a more Germanic, French, German, British kind of heritage or genetic lineage. And yet at the same time, I have this spiritual Native American lineage, which has come to me through many, maybe my near-death experiences, but I just have this awareness through what some people call a spirit guide. I have Red Cloud, who's a spirit guide for me, who's a kind of an ancient leader of the Oglala Sioux tribe in Dakota. And so I've got this kind of like shamanic bone or spirit bone in me. And when I look at shamanic indigenous primal ways of living that hopefully we're returning to, but with technology. You know, the ancients had their technology, which is called ancient technology, like the Egyptians and all this amazing stuff that did amazing things like build pyramids and things. But we are kind of wanting computers and we're wanting kind of crystal technology that makes our life easier. But we also want to return to that innocent way of living, more in nature. And what are the core fundamentals of shamanic primal living that I want to just kind of run through very quickly for your audience, because that will hopefully explain why I'm bringing shamanic medicine into dentistry. So if stress is approximately 80% plus the cause of most diseases, and if oral health is seen as a chronic disease, which it is, like tooth decay and gum disease, and if stress is causing 80+% of that, if we can manage our stress, then we're going to manage our oral health. If we live more indigenously, disconnecting from frequencies that are harmful to us and maybe connecting to frequencies that are beneficial to us, which we're all hearing about forest bathing, we're all hearing about grounding and being barefoot. So these are ways of connecting to Mother Nature and Mother Earth that somehow quickly puts us into balance and resets our regulatory systems, which we call the parasympathetic systems. And in particular, the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. There's the glossopharyngeal, which is the tongue nerve as well. These are being proven to be major relaxers of our system, putting us into what we call rest and digest mode rather than fight or flight mode. And then when we're in rest and digest mode, we heal. We get better digestion, better nutrients into our body. We're calmer. We breathe differently. We breathe deeper, and we oxygenate better. Our blood flows better. We center. We calm. And that's, to me, what the ancients always did. Apart from when they had tribal battles and maybe some stress with the weather, or maybe a wolf getting into the village or whatever, most of their life was really about just living with nature. And when nature was good, like in the summers, very healing. They're out in the sunshine. They weren't afraid of the sun. They may have protected themselves from the midday sun, but they would have got up with dawn, the sunrise, and enjoyed the sunsets. And when we're on holiday, then we do that, right? We're barefoot on the beach. We're taking photographs of the sunrises and sunsets. And then we get home, and then we're just battling life again, unless we've woken up. And when we've woken up, we live more that way, where we appreciate nature, etc. So I may be preaching to the converted a lot, but for anyone that's kind of still very much a city dweller that never looks up and never really appreciates his sunrises, sunsets, and actually hates the sun and is scared of the sun, then maybe look at our ancestors and look how they lived. And one of the big things that I bring up in nearly every podcast that I do is, and it comes from yoga as well. And to me, the yogis of ancient times were pre-Hindu. So there was this era of pre-religious times, and then the spawning of Hinduism, a bit like when the Celts were here, and then Jesus appeared, and then there was kind of more Christianity. So what some people would call the pagan times, or the pre-Christian times, or the pre-religious times, even in India, there was a shamanic time where a lot of those practices that have now been associated with Hinduism maybe were actually shamanic beforehand. And I'm talking about the practices of deep breath work, the practices of stretching and meditation, but in particular, the mantra and the chanting. And the science has caught up, because when we chant and hum in particular, So we look at indigenous North American, South American cultures, that hey, that tribal kind of chanting. Not only does it mean something to that tribe because of the words they're using, but it's the resonance, and that resonance fires these cranial nerves, in particular the vagus nerve. This is again the rest and digest. It's a bit like when we've been to a concert, we've sung along, we know the songs, and we sing along. We've all been to concerts where you get to see that singer. I mean, I know you've got a musical background with your Celtic music, and when you sing and you dance, and you're doing that more earthy dance, like your Celtic dancing. And I'm suddenly thinking of river dancing, with the legs going and the clicking and all that movement. And then there's the drum, and then there's also the local instruments, the indigenous instruments of that time. It's just that the euphoria that gives you, the energy it gives you, the deeper breathing that it makes you breathe. And ultimately, if you're singing or chanting, it's kind of like you're so stimulating this system for everything to come into balance. And when we get home from these concerts and these events, we just feel so at peace, and we're just like grinning from ear to ear. So what an amazing night that was. Yeah. And we've all been to campfires and camps, especially in our sort of youth, with scouts or brownies or church groups or whatever it was. And that's some of your best memories, sitting outside under the stars with the fires. And on many levels, that has nothing to do with dentistry, but the link is there because you get your body into balance, everything else flows. And this is how I like to end, is like, once your saliva really flows, which is stimulated by the parasympathetic system, the vagus nerve, etc., you have an abundance of this elixir that protects your mouth. So it's a bit like people who have dry eyes or dry mouth or dry throat. They are constantly, or dry skin. They constantly have medical problems. It's because the juices have dried up for whatever reason. But luckily for dentistry, we can stimulate that through numerous methods. Certainly the shamanic methods of chanting and singing, etc., are very, very potent. So if you are someone who's suffering from tooth decay and gum disease and has a dry mouth, and maybe that's the cause of the problem that very few dentists really look for and appreciate. They just assume you're not brushing your teeth right. And when you have a dry mouth, the plaque starts to really dry on your teeth. So it's like barnacles on boats, they start to stick better because they're dry. And there isn't the moisture to make them kind of loosely gripping the boat or the teeth. And then on top of that, when it's dry, it changes the pH. So the acidity alkaline balance changes, then you become much more acidic. And what is a tooth? A tooth is a crystal that hates acid. Now, you pour acid on any crystal in the lab, in school, we all put chemicals on things and we watch them kind of flame up and melt. So salts and crystals just hate acid, which is why acid is destroying modern man's teeth. The diet and nutrition of modern man is very acidic. Most drinks are very acidic. But what if your saliva is acidic? So your saliva is dry and acidic? You haven't got a chance. The only chance you've got is keep seeing the hygienist, keep scraping it all off, and keep brushing and flossing, right? But that's not treating the cause. It's treating the symptom. And if you're not prepared to do the work and you're not prepared to change your lifestyle, at least that's better than nothing. But maybe there's hope. Maybe there's hope over a 5 to 10 year life journey. You can return back to innocence, go back to more what people are calling the hippie lifestyle or the holistic lifestyle. The shamanic lifestyle, the primal lifestyle. There's so many different terms for the same thing. Maybe we can self-heal, and there's so much science to show that we can regenerate. We can regenerate pretty much anything and everything. All the cells in our body turn over all the time. Our bone, our skin, hair, it's all turning over and regenerating. So it breaks down, regenerates, breaks down, regenerates. So we're catching up with all that science. We're seeing hair regeneration, people with bald patches getting their hair regenerated. There's talk about dental regeneration now with stem cell technologies coming through. So we're living in a very, very exciting age where stem cell technology plus frequency technology, so magnetics and energetics, are stimulating regrowth. So whilst the shamanic lifestyle is seen as ancient, if you bring the best of modern technology plus return to innocence with lifestyles, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, if you've got challenges now, I think you're going to get through most of them, and you'll enjoy the journey. Whereas you look at our ancestors, look at our grandparents and our parents, they all had to have their teeth taken out, had dentures. It was horrendous. It was horrible, horrible, and torturous, because some of the technologies back in those days were not like they are now. They weren't gentle treatments, certainly. The anesthetics were not great. I don't feel the dentists were necessarily that obliging either. You know, they weren't necessarily true healers. They were quite robust, tough folk who just got the job done. And we're living in a beautiful age now where I feel healers and artists are entering the domain of dentistry now. And that will shift the profession as well. And they already are in the hygiene department, because most of the hygienists are healers and oral health physicians in my world, and many dentists are too. And then there's obviously this big crowd of what I'd call demolition dentists. They're the guys and ladies that love just demolishing mouths, just like in the building world. There's plenty of people who would rather demolish a house and rebuild it than refurbish a house. So the holistic dentists and hygienists tend to be more the refurbishers, but they know when to knock a wall out. They maybe even know when to knock a whole building down, but they don't believe it straight away. They give the body a chance. And sometimes you do lose. Yeah, even doctors lose patients, right? Even dentists lose teeth. But when you lose, and I've seen this many times, maybe 5-10, we've kept teeth for maybe 5 to 10 years, and then the patient is then ready to let that tooth go. They've gone through their grieving cycles. They've gone through this journey and process to let go. Whereas 10 years before, they were told, look, you're going to have all your teeth taken out. They just ran away, had nervous breakdowns, had crises of confidence, and didn't go back to that dentist because, you know, they were just this messenger of bad news, and maybe inappropriately bad news, because these people were just kind of over predicting. They were seeing 10 years ahead as of today. And I'm seeing a bit of a trend of that now, because it is actually easier to put a dental implant in bone that's kind of still there than maybe leave it for another 10 years and the bone has shrunk away. So there is a little bit of a tendency now to take teeth out a little prematurely if you're wanting dental implants. So you have to weigh up each case. My guidance is very global. It's not tooth specific or mouth specific. And if I do feel like we can hold someone's hand, that would only be based on quality diagnostics from x-rays and face-to-face meetings, etc. And that's where ultimately you do need to find a dental team that are not just chasing the implant or chasing the outcome. They are actually chasing your well-being and your health, which I like to think every dental practice does. So as an altruist, I like to believe every dental practice does that. I just don't see it in reality. So that's the fact of life. I think you sometimes, like I said earlier on, you do have to kiss a few frogs to find who's right for you. So have you got any questions for me?
I'm just thinking about, as you move forward with what you're doing, what do you see on your horizon? I know the work that you've been doing and the baseline you've been working to strive people towards. What's kind of out there as a twinkle for you that you'd like to go towards next?
Okay, so it's kind of happening already. I think, so thank you for nudging me on this one. Is literally last week I got the paperwork coming through to create a healing centre on this cute little island on the south of England called the Isle of Wight. But it's spelled W-I-G-H-T, and some of your audience will know of the festival. It was made famous in the 70s when Jimi Hendrix came over from the US and did his thing. And then I think it was 1970, and Bob Dylan came over either the year before or the year after. So they put the Isle of Wight on the map, certainly for the US and maybe Canada too. And I found this magical space of land on someone's farm, and they're holiday lets. They're like old barns that have been kind of jazzed up, and there's our ancient woodland that's protected. And I went to Scotland last year and I did a kind of an official training in being a leader for sweat lodging. And back in my kind of late 20s, I kind of got initiated in the North American Lakota style sweat lodging called the Anipi, which is where very much saplings are bent into like a dome rather than any other structure. Had to be saplings. Back in the day, it had to be buffalo skins. Now this tends to be more kind of tarpaulins and things like that. And after my training in Scotland last year, I got this intuitive message that your future will still be around dentistry, but it's going to be more about healing and detoxification and guiding of people. And we'll have a facility where, maybe 10 to 20 people a week can come and spend a week like in a retreat and do numerous sessions of sweat lodging, where we're hearing more and more about the benefits of saunas and sweating and detoxification. So this is more the primal, ancient way of doing it. And I'm sure many of your audience have done a sweat lodge. May I ask if have you sat in a sweat lodge yourself, Michelle?
I have not, no.
Okay. So in a nutshell, imagine a sauna where most of the time you're clothed. A lot of people get a bit funny whether you wear clothes or not. It's not really about whether you're naked or not. You have to get emotionally and spiritually naked, because you go into a lodge where it's pitch dark. So you have to face the demons of darkness, maybe the demons of your soul and your kind of mind. And in a group, we hold a ceremony. It's a ceremonial event where you are in darkness and in heat and purification. And it's all set up in a way with north, south, east, and west. It's all set up in a beautiful way that you're actually being rebirthed. You're actually in the womb of Mother Earth. And when you come out, you're rebirthed. So it has this magical spiritual side, but its practical side so potent. Because just like saunas are good for us and we sweat, the skin is our largest organ. And sweating removes serious amounts of toxicity. Yes, the liver purifies and there are other organs that purify us, but supposedly the best way to remove and release ourselves from toxins is through our skin. So sweating is powerful. When you hold the ceremonies, they're guided. So everyone gets to speak with a talking stick and everyone gets to bare their soul. And each round has a different theme. So you have, like, for example, a gratitude theme. So you just bless and say thank you for all the great things in your life, maybe the lessons in your life. And then you'll have maybe a sad round, the pains or who you want to send healing to. So it's kind of like a spiritual circle, a spiritual group. Many people do this, not in a sweat lodge. But when you're doing it in darkness, I feel like you can be more authentic. When you're in darkness, you have less fear of what people are going to think of you when you just bare your soul. Mm-hmm. So there's so many benefits of doing it. And then also you're sitting on Mother Earth. You're barefoot, so you're connected to nature. The stones are foraged and sourced yourself. And ideally the team of people that go for the sweat lodge have sourced all the saplings and are involved in the community spirit of building the lodge. So if people come for a few days, then we can do that as a group. Some people just come for a day or a weekend and it's pre-made. So they're just coming for maybe the mind, body, spirit kind of therapeutics of the sweat lodge. And then more importantly, I feel is the after journey, like with all therapy, is the integration of that. So when you've come out or when we've come out, then spending time together and processing and airing and explaining and expressing what happened, etc. And what was profound for me, my very first sweat lodge, was I was in pitch darkness. You can't even see your hand. You feel the hot steam come on your face. And it was a gentleman running the lodge. And in the middle of his flow, I suddenly saw in pitch dark, and I've never had a vision before this event. So I was one of these people who heard about people's visions and almost had a bit of vision envy. Like, I wish I could have that. And then, no joke, this bright white headdress that was the whole length of the lodge from top to bottom. It's illuminated the lodge with this kind of like halo effect of these bright white feathers. And it was like a headdress. It wasn't just the odd feather. It was like a headdress of feathers. It was just nearly 5 to 6 foot long on two sides. And I was like bamboozled by this, kept it to myself. And then when we came out and we were integrating the sweat lodge experience, the leader said, did anyone by any chance see my spirit guide? And I went, I don't know whether I saw your spirit guide, but I saw this amazing white headdress. And he just smiled at me. He said, well, you just saw... That's my guide. And I think his name was White Feather. And he said, yeah, that's my guide, White Feather. And ever since then, I knew, and I'm 60 now, and I think I was about 29 then, 28, 29. So a good 40 plus years. I now believe in visions. I now believe in spirits and believe in spirit guides. And I don't feel it's that easy to believe in that stuff unless you have a true experience. And no one can ever shake that out of me. No one can say, "Oh, that's a load of rubbish. You were just imagining it. It's, you were probably taking drugs or something like that," which I wasn't. So I know in my heart that that's what sweat lodging gave me. It gave me that powerful insight. So I know that that can happen for anybody that goes into any space, let alone a sweat lodge space. And I don't have the intention of creating that, but if a spirit wants to show itself, it will. And when you set up a sweat lodge, you set it up ceremonially. I actually set up dental rooms every morning, like someone sets up a church or a temple. I will burn incense, do my invocations, etc., to set up a sacred space. And obviously you do that in a sweat lodge too. So you know that it's totally safe and you've set it up to be protected. Because when you start opening up to different realms, you realize there are lower realms as well as upper realms. And when your eyes are open to this stuff, you know you want to protect yourself from the lower realms. I'm not convinced there are many lower realms, that many beings in the lower realms that are really that helpful. They're very helpful to us, but I don't know if they're there for our healing other than for a painful journey. And I think what's the right way of putting it? I'd rather for ceremony that we're protected away from these beings. And at the same time, I'm kind of, as a shaman, I like the crow, which is I have a lower world totem animal as the crow. So that crow is kind of a great teacher for me. But I don't necessarily want to kind of allow these beings, even though they can be seen as beautiful beings, I'd rather we just kind of seal that dimension off, and then when we're in a sweat lodge, it's just either the middle realm, which is our realm, and then the upper realm, which is full of angels and doves. So my upper realm bird is a dove, a bird of peace, and my middle realm is a deer. It's kind of really beautiful connection to deer. And so I love to kind of just bring the space to allow middle and upper realm beings just to kind of support and nurture the space and the environment. So why is that important for dentistry? Sweating is a great detoxification. I feel like a lot of ill health is due to our inner organs being blocked and toxic. And that's where environmental doctors are really coming in nowadays with all their potions, their detoxifying potions and nutraceuticals and herbs and saunas. There's infrared saunas and many different technologies coming out now to kind of help us release toxicity from the body. And there's quite a cool theory, and that is that if more toxicity is leaving our body than is entering our body, then we will recuperate. We don't have to get rid of it all. Because there's talk about, well, mercury, aluminium, cadmium, lead, all these horrible heavy metals, they stay in our fat cells, they stay in our bodies for maybe for life. But the theory kind of resonates for me, is as long as there's more going out than is going in, we will get better. And we can still live with some toxicity in our body, but we will get into balance and we will live with that toxicity. And that's no different to me than someone from a battlefield who comes home with some shrapnel, if a bullet or a bomb has exploded and got into their muscle, their skin, and they live the rest of their life, another 50 years of their life, with a piece of metal stuck in their skin. They don't have it operated out. A lot of people live really well with what I would see as slightly toxic dentistry in their mouth, some metals in their mouth that other people poo-poo, but they live fine. So maybe their detoxification systems, their constitution is tipping more into more is leaving the body than is going out of the body. So a daily, weekly practice of some form of detoxification has got to be a good thing. And bringing in fasting, where we either intermittent fast and don't kind of feed the oral bacteria or the gut bacteria too much starch or any starch, could also be very potent in healing our mouths. And plenty of research is coming through. If you stop feeding the bugs that cause tooth decay and gum disease, then they're going to die off. So fasting, if you can be really strong and fast for a day to 3 days, maybe a week, build yourself up, you'll really eradicate some of those pathogens. But even the 18-6 fasting, where you're only really eating maybe more of the primal lifestyle, so less of the carbs, less of the starches, which feed those bacteria, and you're not eating for 18 hours, maybe you're also going to give your body more of a chance to kind of get back into that balance. So I see, going back to your question, me personally, really going deeply into more the ancient way of living, eating more primarily, breathing more primarily, chanting more, getting my body back into balance and teaching other people to do that. And there are many people now out there on the ethers that are the teachers, the breathwork teachers, the hot and cold therapy teachers, the water teachers, the cold water teachers. I just feel like I'm going more down that, but with that dental hat on. That makes sense. So rather than leave dentistry and just become this kind of breathwork teacher or shamanic medicine teacher, still want to keep my dental roots as part of my essence, my teaching, because that's kind of what makes me kind of a USP, for want of a better expression, or a unique proposition, but not really necessarily as a business, but as my soul. This is who I am. This is my journey. So therefore, why change that? Why drop that for that? Why not integrate the two? So I don't really know how it's going to evolve, other than I'm now connecting with so many dentists and healers around the world through podcasts, through the website, through social media, running a huge connection through TikTok of all places. And I was told by a patient, try TikTok, Mark, your stuff will fly on TikTok. And I said, really? It seemed to be a bit of a kind of a jocular site, a lot of people twerking and just being goons, but it's changing, it's shifting. It seems to be very open to healers expressing their ways. And Instagram is the other one for obvious reasons. Those two seem to resonate on a social media side of things. I'm not really a huge fan of social media, other than now I'm in it, I see the benefit of it and how it can just go into the ethers like podcasts. And if you're ready for that frequency, it will somehow enter your life. You'll either just scroll and suddenly it'll ping up, or the podcast will ping up. So I just know that my message will be received by the people who are ready for it or on that frequency. It only has to be one person or 10 people. It doesn't have to be millions of people. That's the ego talking. It's just, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. And I'm comfortable with that. And it really nourishes my soul because I'm living my truth, my true path. And I'm very hungry to be sweat lodging more than being in a dental room. So I know my time as a clinician in sport, they call it hanging up the boots. And they're usually only 30, right? You get a tennis player, a American football player, or you name it kind of player. They don't really go way past 30. They might go to 40. And then and then they go into coaching or into punditry on the TV and the radio, or they do something else, or they just play golf for the rest of their life. I don't know. But for me, it's not about totally hanging them up. It's kind of keeping a finger involved in dentistry, staying present to the new trends and the new innovations. And whilst I don't need necessarily my license to do that, I'm keeping my license. So it allows me still to be face-to-face, put my fingers in people's mouths. As soon as you lose your license, you can't touch teeth. You can be a healer. I have separate insurances for my healing work. But I feel very much I'm switching from a dental clinic to a land space, which will be a healing center too, where I do a whole host of other things, which are in my bio, which is working a lot with sound frequencies. For 30 odd years, I've been banging gongs and other instruments, the shamanic drum, and just working with the chakras and releasing, and then going through journeys, past life journeys, shamanic journeys, soul retrieval journeys, where I tend to do that one-to-one in a healing space. And I do it in group workshops too. So I hope, I sense that I'll be kind of dovetailing it mainly in this one space, but equally, I wouldn't be surprised if I get invited to go to different parts of the world to be part of a team of collaborators on a week's retreat with yoga teachers and with breathwork teachers. And then that's when I can then bring in the dentistry, because I'm then kind of like adding something that's slightly different. So a bit like this podcast, but in a workshop environment where it's more one-to-one, face-to-face, can be a bit more specific questions and answers. Like, I've got this tooth, Mark. What do you think? Kind of thing. And then I can be more face-to-face as long as everyone's comfortable with talking in public about it. So that's my quick answer to your question. So yeah, keeping my foot in dentistry, but most of my body on the land and getting in touch with this return to innocence, as I'm calling it.
I think for the listeners to just listening to the ways that you weave in and out of the holistic to the scientific to the empirical and that back and forth is really that offering that permission to people as they're listening to really think about how they want to navigate their self-care and their wellness plans and what that means and what resonates and doesn't resonate. And I think a lot of people don't pay so much attention to that resonating piece. And so I'm happy that you invited that in, the way that you're looking at it and the way that you open it up for that discussion, not meaning that it's one or the other, and where people often talking about complementary and integrative health or complementary and alternative health. And it's not that it needs to be that alternative, it's that holistic piece. And I so appreciate that when you're looking at teeth, you're not just looking at teeth. I have a lot of people who come to me for Tai Chi and I want to fix my foot and I want to fix my hand and I want to fix my neck. And it's yes, but it's likely not the problem. And when you go back and you just release and open, then the problems solve themselves without having to dive deep into fix that one tooth or fix that shoulder. Yeah.
100%. And again, it depends what's being presented. If there's an open wound, like a broken tooth, a cavity, that's a no-brainer. I'm talking about the stuff where people are coming in with neuralgias and weird symptoms, and x-rays don't really diagnose anything, and the clinical assessments don't really know what's going on. We haven't touched on dental meridians either. Every tooth has a pathway to an organ. So could the organ be an alarm bell that's showing up in the tooth? Like there's a liver problem in your canine, or a bladder problem on your incisor, a heart problem on your wisdom tooth. It's two ways. Everything's a two-way journey, right? And it is hard to share that information with someone that's not resonating with you. So you do have to kind of, as a practitioner, just allow the right people to come to you. And I think that comes when you stop trying, you surrender. So I'm not on this podcast to pull in millions of patients or any patients. I'm here just to be me. And if it kind of then attracts an email or a phone call or whatever it attracts, an invitation, let's call it, then that's fine. But if nothing comes from it, that's fine too. There's no real agenda. And I feel that's very, very strange on social media in particular. There's always a selling of something, isn't there? It's like da and buy my this and buy my this and buy my that. And I don't have a problem with that, but I don't feel there are that many people just being themselves to be themselves, if that makes sense. And ultimately, if you are your true self, there must be something you're giving, your energy, and you will hopefully impact people. And if that person has a book or has a workshop or has a product, they don't need to tell everyone. You'll go on their website and then you'll find out they have a book or a product, etc. So it's almost like a relaxed way of when you're just yourself. You're not trying. And I often say this about dating, right? That when you're kind of single, especially when you're a lot younger and you're a bit desperate for a partner, the more desperate you are, the more repulsive you become. It's almost like, and when you're cool and you just chill and you sit down and you're just sipping a glass of something with your friends, and then suddenly someone appears. And that seems to be the way, that's one of the tricks of life, really. It's just let go, be yourself, and let it flow. All right.
Exactly.
And going back to flow, that's when your saliva flows. That's when your blood flows. It's when your nervous system kind of flows, your digestion flows. Even the body just seems to go back into that way. So I think the ego is trying too hard to sell dental products and herbal products and medical products, when if we just allow the body to reset itself, you may still need surgeries and products, but let the body reboot itself first, right? And then see what's then needed, rather than throw by guesswork all these other products into the mix before someone's kind of reset themselves. So
Beautifully said. I'm going to invite, for the people that may have been sitting and listening, to become active. so that they're engaged moving forward. So one, you may have taken a bunch of notes and thought about some of the different things, some ideas too you want to go back to and reflect on a little bit more about what Mark has said. But also then we want to get you moving. So I was trying to think, what do I follow a conversation about teeth and dental health with? So I went to my Tai Chi class, and one of the phrases that was shared with us was, smile and your hips will open. And I was thinking about, you were talking about people who would cover up their smile, but really when you smile, your jaw relaxes, your shoulders relax, your hips relax, the joints open, and all because you just chose to smile. So as you're going about the rest of your day today, I invite you to use your movement, which could be getting up from your desk or getting out of the car, but then think about how you can smile at the next person that you see, smile at several people that you meet today, and just start to notice how that smiling is actually going to cause that relaxation and move you in a different way. And so that's what I'll bring to the table. Anything for you, Mark, that you want to share as a movement piece?
Yeah, and believe it or not, there's less muscles needed to make a smile than to make a frown. So to pull everything down takes more muscles, right? So it's actually easier to smile, but easier said than done when you're not feeling great. Going back to Tony Robbins, I did his mastery program 30 odd years ago. I'm sure Tony Robbins has touched Canada in some ways with his message, his larger than life message in many ways. And he studied depressed people, and he kind of proves that if you are kind of just looking down and feeling down, if you just looked up and moved your body in a different way, your emotional state would improve. It wouldn't necessarily heal the root cause, but just by smiling, you will feel better. So even when you're feeling not great, somehow looking for something that you're grateful for. So this attitude of gratitude is such a powerful thing. So when you're feeling low, if you can even just find one resource or one memory or one aspect to your life that you are grateful for, that will already then make you look up a little bit. And then as you look up, you kind of then ask yourself to smile. It'll be easier with more resources, it's easier to smile. So if you can find at least one memory or one reason to be grateful, fantastic. And then once you've got one, ask for another one. Ask and you shall receive. Even the worst life possible will have resources and memories and things to focus on that we can be grateful for. Even in really dire times, even if it's an ancient memory, there will be something to find to grab hold of, and that grabbing hold of then lifts our spirit in great adversity. That's what masters seem to be able to do in great adversity. They seem to tap into this magic, and maybe they just have this innate ability to smile and to loosen their hips and to be agile and free in horrendous situations. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's easier said in a positive environment, but even in a negative environment, it's just a kind of like a training. And ultimately then when you do that, the inner smile starts to kind of flood up. So I think that's really why I started the podcast on about the inner smile and the outer smile. And there's a great expression, fake it until you make it. I think to truly innerly smile, you either have to be lucky and have near-death experiences where you shed and you purge your story. I think it's our story that causes us so much pain. And it's not what actually happens to us that causes our pain. It's our interpretation, and it's our story and our feeling of not being heard and listened to, etc. That probably perpetuates our pain. So trauma healing is something that when we heal our trauma, we naturally have an inner smile and then an outer smile. I truly believe that. I really, truly believe that. And the work I do as a non-dentist is, my healing work is where we go down the rabbit holes of traumas. When did things first start for you? Mm-hmm. And we go into kind of extreme situations, and then the purging and the releasing. And if it's done in kind of what I'd call a more hypnotic state or a shamanic state, you then get actually a catharsis. If you just talk about it in a conscious level, like with a therapist, it has therapeutic value, but it rarely seems to make the shift. And to truly make the shift, you have to go through some kind of catharsis, and experiential release is basically what a catharsis is. So with that emotional release, tears, etc., then the memory doesn't have so much potency. That story becomes then more of that was my life, that's my biography. But now I can smile. I can look back at the expression. One day I'll look back at this and laugh, or at least look back at it and not be in pain. Just look back from an observer's viewpoint and go, yeah, that was shit. That was a tough moment in my life, but I'm over it. I can look at it with my eyes truly, and not kind of bypass it and not kind of suppress it. And that's true healing. And then when you're truly healed, then that flows. And what are people calling shining? When you shine, you shine your light. I don't think you can easily shine that light when you're full of trauma that hasn't been released. I think you have to release your trauma, and therefore it's through darkness that we ultimately lighten up. We just chase the light, and the shadow follows us, right? So I think Carl Jung was talking about that many moons ago. So whilst hanging out with the angels and the fairies and the unicorns has its place, if you're doing that to bypass your trauma, I'm not convinced you'll be as balanced and as innerly smiling as you really want to be. So maybe that's my message now, is kind of like, if you have dental trauma and dental trauma is stopping you from going to the dentist or even speaking to a dentist, because you don't have to go to a dentist for treatment. You just go for diagnosis first. I try and encourage that, to say, go and visit a clinic to find out what they say. You don't have to go with the attitude that you're going to have the treatment. If you haven't been for 5 years, 10 years, you might be pleasantly surprised and get told there isn't anything really that kind of needed. And that'll be a relief. And if you get told you do need lots of treatment, then at least you then know. And you're then already starting to kind of release the demon that's kind of holding you back from visiting the dentist. So you're already facing the demon. And then if you've found the right dental team, they will hold your hand and you'll go through therapy, not just dental therapy, you'll go through psycho-spiritual therapy just to gradually get there. And if you need someone to be by the side of the dental team, like a Reiki therapist or a healer, any kind of healer, let's just call them, whether they're crystal healers, sound healers, therapists, any kind of therapist that's really helping you, or let's call them trauma release therapists. Shall we just say TR therapist, trauma release therapist, alongside the dentist? Because I don't think all dentists are going to be trauma release therapists. I think a lot of dentists are still very good with their hands. They're the mechanics, the surgeons, etc. Often the nurses and the reception staff and the hygienists are the trauma release therapists. They do it subtly. Same in medicine. The doctor kind of comes in with a diagnosis. You're going to die in 5 years' time, and you have a meltdown, and the nurse picks up the pieces and kind of does some of the therapy. That's kind of very common in hospitals, where the doctor gives the bad news and walks out. It's cold and clinical, and then the nurse kind of does the therapy and actually gives hope. And a very Deepak Chopra type of doctor would say, look, 10% of people are going to survive this, but I don't know if you're one of that 10%. I believe you could be. So therefore, I want to give you hope. Rather than say 90% of you are going to die, so you may as well go home and write your will. Just flip it around and just be, look for the good, look for the positive, and then maybe you change the statistics at the same time. There's a lot of research in how you can change statistics by how you communicate diagnosis. So if you never give hope with your diagnosis, then the statistics will always be dire. Because there's a huge psychoneuroimmunology aspect to health and wellness and disease management. That's why there are all these faith healing cures and miracle cures, and people have near-death experiences and just cure from whatever they had before their near-death experience. So we can somehow magically transcend a lot of this physical body and this 3D diagnosis, as I like to call it, from doctors and dentists. And some things we can't. Maybe we can't all that. Maybe I'm limiting by saying that. I don't know. But I sometimes struggle. When I see a really wobbly tooth with a big hole, I just don't believe personally that tooth has got much longer. So you may as well just take it out. But if some tooth is solid, got a hole in it, and it hurts a bit, I believe we can turn that around for sure. And so do most dentists, to be fair. So you can see we could talk all day, couldn't we? We could talk all day.
We could. Can you share what is the best resource for people to find you?
Okay, and that resource will also improve. I haven't started really putting in all the books and the other collaborators that have mentored me. So that's coming. I just need to kind of get into the right energy space to kind of download all that information. It's just my website, which is the dental shaman or shaman.com. And that's all it is, the dentalshaman.com. I've got a dental website called mortyboysdentalspa.com. That tends to be more for kind of my day-to-day clinical stuff. If you just communicate to me on the dentalshaman.com, all questions go through that portal. And then we then either talk on Zoom, on WhatsApp, or even on social media if you want to talk on social media. I try and take it out of social media so that we don't have the whole world listening to our conversations. But some people seem happy with that, but I wouldn't be.
That's beautiful. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time today and for the work that you're doing. And you are really
Thank you for having me.
Changing the conversations and also creating the way that people can have conversations. And I think that's half the battle is trying to understand how to bring our worlds into a holistic approach with our viewpoints all coming together. So thank you very much.
Very much so. It's been a joy and a real pleasure. So thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So as you finish up the podcast, make sure you finish up sipping on your tea, but also just think about how you want to move forward and how some of the things that you heard today might be able to help you get that plan in place or even start walking those steps forward. So be well, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell. There are a couple of resources I want to just point out. When you go to the website, greenwellcenter.com, you'll have a pop-up window. That pop-up gives you the top 8 easy stress releasers that you can use every day. That's something you can put beside your computer, the bathroom mirror, beside the bedside table. A great resource. Also, my YouTube channel. It is full of playlists with all kinds of different ways that you can activate energy and bring vitality into your day. You can find that when you go to YouTube at Michelle Greenwell. And last, if you're a Linktree person, Linktree, linktr.ee/Greenwell Center. That has all my resources in one spot. Those are for intricate little things that you can't get everywhere. And it's a wonderful way for me to be able to share all the different aspects of the kind of work I do. So thank you for listening. Be sure to drink that tea. And if you want to have the tea blend that was shared in the podcast today, then be sure to check out capebretontea.ca. Have a wonderful day.